If God wanted you to avoid pain, he wouldn't have penalties associated with law. God knows. Phil, just sorry, not Phil.
It's not.
Sorry.
It's Aaron.
Aaron. Sorry, Aaron.
Else, just behind you, Don.
Aaron. Yeah. Thanks.
How do we know what's from God, what's not?
Yeah, it's a very good question, Aaron. You got to remember that every time you're in an addiction and you're asking for something, whoever gives you a thing in while you're in that addiction is not going to be God. It's not going to be anyone connected to God. It's going to be somebody who wants to feed your addiction for some personal reason. And in this case, for the guys, their personal reason was they had a bad life on earth where their mum and dad didn't care for them very much. They had no one really interested in most of their life. And so that was their reason for giving you those feelings. But it's still an addiction on their part to give you those feelings. And if your addiction is to feel good with God so that you don't have to feel bad in yourself with your family or your parents or the lack of care that you've had in your life, then of course you're in an addiction when you're asking. And when you're in addiction, when you're asking, the response is never going to be from God. Right? So that's the main way you tell. You follow me? It's never going to be from God if you're in an addiction when you're asking. And this is something that is really not well understood on earth. On earth, there's a very strong thing that if you're having a spirit if you're having an interaction with someone in spirit, as they call it, and it feels good, then it's God, or they're aligned with God. Not understanding that actually, for the majority of people on earth, when you're in a heavy addiction, anybody meeting that addiction feels good, and that's what most people don't understand.
What about times where you might have cried?
Yeah. Most tears that people express on earth are tears related to what I'd call tantruming. So that if you think of a little child, he's in the lolly aisle with his mother, and candy aisle with his mother, and he wants the candy. He knows the candy tastes good. He wants it.
Sweets.
What do you call it here? Sweets. He wants some sweets. He wants. He knows that they taste good. He wants it, and Mummy doesn't give it. Right? Mummy might decide it's not good for him. It's not good for him constantly have these sweets, so Mum doesn't give it. He will firstly go through rage, which many of you young guys have felt in the past. And then what you generally do is you go into this state of just having a good sort of cry about not getting what you wanted. And that's still in an addiction, when you have a good cry about not getting what you want. And so that is still the expression of the addiction. And as a result, when you receive something from another person who's helping you out in that place, that is going to be an addiction being met by somebody. All right? Now, that is not the state of truly connecting to what it's about. So what it's about for many of you guys, for example, either dad or both mum and dad haven't really demonstrated a lot of care or interest in you guys. And as a result, you want someone to be interested in, someone to sort of acknowledge your existence, someone to think you're special, someone to think you're great. In the case of some others of you guys, you've had your mum and dad think you're great all your life. And so now you're addicted to just having somebody think you're great. And so you then need, someone from the spirit world come along and think you're great all the time.
Am I the second one?
Sorry?
Am I the second one?
I think pretty much you are, don't you? Yeah, that you've been addicted to that. And so either one of those two things generally has happened. And so what happens then, if somebody comes along and says, you're great, you're great, you're great, you feel great in your day-to-day life, you feel powerful and great in your day-to-day life, but it's not God making you feel that. God doesn't prop up unhealed emotions. What God does is give you his real feelings about you, which are very different than what you want from God. And this is what most people don't understand. And so what we see is a lot of people, but particularly people involved in New Age spirituality and people, young men in particular, who become connected in this way to what they call God. It's often just a spirit who's just trying to help you out, mate, with your bad feelings. And with the spirit themselves not understanding that it's not to your long-term benefit. So they only see it as like an immediate benefit that you feel good now, straight away. And they don't see what's happening in the long term, which is really you're becoming dependent on another person, on somebody else, which is not a good thing, actually. And so they don't see that. And so what they're doing is they're just trying to provide you with the feelings you need to have a life. But also there's a level of codependence in that these spirits then get to live their unlived life through you. Yeah. So all of the spirits had died through some accident or they all died before their time in their own mind. Now, some of them died of old age, but they still felt it was before their time. They hadn't finished enjoying their life on Earth yet.
They had sort of a chip on their shoulder, a lot of them, I didn't get to have my fun, so now
now I'm having my fun. And this guy wants to have fun, so I'm going to have fun through him.
And also, there's also this power thing, like when you have had when you receive adoration growing up as a child and then you get to feel powerful over people, a lot of them were enjoying that experience, sort of they wanted to feel powerful over people at times.
And particularly powerful over other men. In particular, but also if it's an injury with their mothers, they want to feel powerful over women as well. Yeah. So they get, by setting up lots of, what did he call them, hookups, is now what you call them, is it?
I think
by setting up lots of hookups with women, there's also a poor treatment of women involved in that, which is really an expression of anger towards women. But really it's an anger towards mum being expressed by having sexual liaisons with women that you don't care for.
And feeling powerful.
And feel powerful making you feel powerful.
And the woman feels small. Some of them had that as well.
Yeah. And so there's a lot of sort of dynamics that are going on, which are all feeding an addiction, different types of addictions. And the thing you need to bear in mind is when you're in addictions and you want feelings from others, there'll be plenty of people who will want to give you those addictions as long as you pay the price for those addictions. And the price generally is that they get to share in the addiction with you, or they get to feel some other thing that they're addicted to feeling. That's the price. And there's always a price.
So, Jay, are you really saying that the answer is to develop sensitivity then to your own condition, really, when you're seeking addiction rather than when you're sincere?
Correct.
It's going to be difficult to discern before you do that, isn't it?
Correct. Yeah. And so that conversation I had with Errol, eventually he broke through into seeing some things because I harped on them a bit. And also it was difficult for him because he wanted to leave the conversation at certain points, and me talking to him kept him in the conversation, which he felt was quite unpleasant at the time, but now he can see the benefit of that. So you can do that sometimes when talking to a person who's a spirit on Earth, because they feel drawn to engage through their injuries, generally feeling drawn to engage their conversation further. And sometimes you can have some effect. But it was sort of touch and go one way or the other as to what he would choose to do. And if I had allowed him to leave, which I could have done at different times, then we wouldn't have had some breakthrough that he finished up having. But that's the same with you guys too. You either are going to actually have to come to some self-realization that things are going on, or somebody's going to have to enlighten you at some point about the reality of it. And there are not hardly any people on it I don't know any person on Earth at this moment who actually understands the dynamics. So aside from ourselves, that understands the dynamics of what's actually going on between many young men and the spirit of young men who are with those young men causing further havoc. As he finished up saying, he's caused quite a lot of havoc over this, what is it, since 72, he's passing, and now it's 2024, so it's like 52 years he's been doing this with different guys. Yeah. And of course, some of them have died as a result because they've had accidents they wouldn't probably otherwise had, or they became reckless because they had a bravado feeling. They did, you know, some of the things these guys were involved in is getting guys to go rock climbing without ropes and all these other things just to get the thrill of it. And, you know, and some of them died. You know, there's all sorts of things that happen through the influence of these kind of spirits who feel they didn't live a life. And the selfish part about it from the spirit's perspective is if you die, then all they do is move on to another person who's still alive and do it again.
Yeah, or if you end up in jail, or if you end up, you know,
if you
alone,
end up in a restricted place, in other
or
words,
old
you
and
die or you get injured or you...
Nobody is interested in you anymore. They just go to somebody else, don't they?
Yeah.
When he was talking, I kind of had the feeling like I've been conned.
Yeah.
Is that like truth to that?
Well, I don't know if you have been conned in the sense that it is a confidence trick that has been played upon you, but you do need to question your own part in it. Does that make sense? Because there is a feeling that what I notice in most young men we meet, they don't want to do the work involved in true spiritual development. They want some magical solution. So you can only really be conned by you need to sort of understand that the feeling you have, which is, I want a magical solution. There is no magical solution really in God's universe, but these spirits will come along and give you the illusion of one.
And particularly the feeling, I shouldn't have to feel bad for any length of time is a feeling that a lot of people have.
Yeah.
You know, I shouldn't have to feel bad. I want it to be easy. It should be easy. And that sort of sets you up to, sort of opens you to these kind of influences.
Yeah.
Especially if you have the additional thing of like, I want power. I want to feel
better than others.
Superior, popular, those kinds of things. Yeah.
Yeah. So you might think you're being conned, but actually a lot of it's to do with your own desires as to what allowed that to occur. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. So very important to understand some fundamental principles about, you know, what pulls these kind of people to you. You know, they're not interested in a guy like me because I take personal responsibility for my feelings. I go through my own feelings. They think I'm an idiot. You know, when they're in that state, they think I'm an idiot. They think I'm trying to torture everybody who I speak to as well. So they have some pretty, you know, anybody who is self-responsible emotionally, they think bit of a nutter, really. So when you are not responsible for it, they think, yeah, good on you, mate. We feel the same way. Good on you, mate. Like, you'll cheer you up. We'll make you feel better. You need a bit of sex here, and you need a bit of, you know, you need to bully someone there, and you need to look good over here, and you need to do that thing on the internet, you know, that gives you some money because everybody will love you for it. And you need to do this other thing. And a lot of the things that they are encouraging you to do are not your desires. They're just things they're telling you to do so they think you can have a better life, a life that they didn't have. But there's also a degree of selfishness for them in the sense that they're also trying to live their unlived life through you as well. So it's a combined selfishness, if you like. Your own selfishness in terms of avoiding things and wanting a certain type of life mixed with their selfishness of them wanting the same things as you and wanting the same kind of life. And so in the end, you can see why all these things are allowed by God, because at the end of the day, it is your desire being expressed in its true manner, not in the way you imagine, but in its reality. Yeah. So yes, you have been conned, but in a way you like to be conned too. You know, you like the illusion that you'll feel better about yourself if just somebody loves you. You like that illusion, and that's not true. The only time you're really going to feel better about yourself is when you love you and you realize God loves you. Right? That's when you really feel better about yourself. So, yeah, there is a definite strong attraction drawing these spirits to you. And this is why there are so many earthbound spirits, because there's all these earthbound spirits, a lot of them, as I said to him, he didn't start out in this darker place as what he ended up in the spirit world, because as he did these things, he got darker and darker and darker. But like I said to him, and he was even conscious that he was getting darker and he was worried about it, but he wasn't that worried about it, if that makes sense. And he didn't like me saying it, and he didn't want me to remind him of it, but he was conscious of it. Right? And this is the thing that will happen to you too. Sooner or later, if you engage these kind of things with these spirits and you keep doing these things on earth, sexual liaisons with lots of different women, doing things to get attention or get approval, doing things to make yourself feel good only being concerned about yourself and not giving to anyone else, your life will get dark too. Exactly the same. But you've got to ask yourself, do I have that same level of selfishness? And if you're honest with yourself, you'll see you do. Make sense? And then you can change that. But you can't change something you're not aware of. So, and the thing I was trying to help him see was that by lying to you about, particularly when you're asking for God's help, by lying to you, by giving you help under those circumstances, he was really masquerading the role of God to you, which then reinforces the establishment of your bond with him. And then you think he's God. And I've seen many spirits then start to feel they're God as a result of that.
Yeah, he wasn't in that state.
He wasn't in that state yet.
Some spirits really enjoy that feeling.
Yeah.
Tim had the other mic.
Oh, Tim's got the other mic, so we got Tim. And then after Tim, can we go... Mary can choose.
Oh,
Tim.
Yeah. To Philip.
My original question was going to be the same as Aaron's, but that helped a lot. I also definitely have very much the same desires, power and superiority, and wanted to be special.
Yep.
I've felt that I've had some sincerity in prayer.
Yep.
And I've been it helped being in church in worship. That was like felt like the first experiences for me.
Yeah.
But I guess I'm curious if I'm just delusional as well with that.
If the motivation inside the person is to avoid their life, you can go and have a so-called spiritual experience, but it's always going to be with a spirit and not with God. Right? So for many of you, when you say, I've received love from God, what we feel is you haven't received love from God. You've received an acknowledgement and a strong, powerful feeling from a spirit to meet your addiction. Now, obviously, the problem with that is that if you believe it is God, then you're more than likely going to try to repeat the desire you had, and they are more than likely going to repeat their response. Right? And the damage of that to you is that it starts creating inside of you the delusion that you are actually having the relationship with God. And what we have met many, many people who believe very, very strongly that they have a relationship with God, and yet they don't have one at all, and they have one instead with a spirit, usually earthbound or in the first sphere, who's giving them, or a group of spirits that are giving them this energy. So in the case of Round River, I think there were about 9 of these men giving you this energy. Does that make sense? They like you. They like the idea. You're a young fellow. There's certain characteristics about you they feel they're going to be able to get your life going in a good way, but also experience a lot of things for themselves through you. And so they like being with you for that reason. So there's a codependence that develops, you see. So
Similar things happened for Tim too.
Yeah, similar things have happened to you.
In the past, even
past.
before you heard divine truth.
Yeah,
you know?
you're starting to address it now, and I do feel you are becoming more sincere and more honest with yourself. As you hear and receive more information, you're becoming more honest. But there is still this tendency that you have to avoid your pain by having your addictions met, and that's the danger. The danger is avoiding your pain. Remember yesterday in the answer we gave to
Laura? No?
No,
Mikey?
Mikey, about the desire to avoid pain being a powerful motivator for you to do things which are in the end just going to be for the purpose of avoiding pain. Right? Now, many spirits who are in the earthbound condition are also avoiding their pain. So Errol was avoiding his pain from his past.
Yeah, when you go to church, it's interesting with church, isn't it? Because you want to go somewhere where you feel like everyone's focused on God. But you need to be careful in that environment. Saying to Perry too, because I know you sort of visit churches and stuff. A lot of times there's a lot of spirits there who've been Christian on earth who have a very similar feeling. They want to avoid their pain. They see you want to avoid their pain. They're like, they want to give you sort of approval for coming to this place that's, again, so they just give you feelings. They just give you a kind of an approval feeling. Yep, you're in the right spot. Good on you.
Good on you, mate.
This is good. You're a good bloke.
You're starting to get interested in God. Good on you.
Yes, good. And they think they're doing a good thing, but actually they're in an addiction. And they're encouraging you in your addiction. So you've got to be a bit circumspect about what
I have
Jesus
seen
is saying.
some churches, some Christian churches. One I went to in Barbados. I didn't go to it. It was an outside church, and we went to go to the place to have something to eat, and right in front of us they were having a church service outside, and it was a Pentecostal Christian church service. And almost everybody in the entire service became overcloaked. Some of them were flopping around on the ground, and everybody was thinking it was great. Great. This was all manifestations of the Spirit, they called it. And it was manifestation of many, many, many spirits, actually, but not God.
Not the Holy Spirit.
Not the Holy Spirit and not God. And so nobody there received divine love the entire time the service was on, but they called it that because they were all just getting overcloaked with different spirits the entire time, right? And we see these things happening all the time, everywhere we go. We go to a spiritualist church the other night when we were in England last week, and watched a medium, and there were people there overcloaked, with these same kind of spirits helping them out and making them feel good. And it's just most people on earth don't understand the interaction between the earth life and the spirit life, and they don't understand how seamless it is, and they don't understand how much it's based upon what you want, right? And a lot of times our desires are not very pure as to what we want. So, the average person on earth would believe that if they want to avoid pain, that's a good thing. They think that's a pure desire, actually, a good thing. And quite often they try to engage God in avoiding their pain, only to have the effect of having spirits come in the guise of God, helping them avoid pain. If God wanted you to avoid pain, he wouldn't have penalties associated with law. God knows that by feeling some pain when you break a law, you will be more conscious that a law is broken. If there was no penalty associated with breaking a law, like imagine on the highway, they have a sign that says 70 miles an hour. You're driving along at 80. Policeman pulls you over, says, "You're driving at 80, mate." And you go, "Yeah, And he goes, no worries, and lets you go.
You're like, he's a nice guy. I see him
You
every
go.
week. I see him every week. It's great.
And the next time you drive along the highway, you're going to be doing 70? No.
No, you want to pull over and talk to that nice
Yeah.
police officer.
You'll be doing 80, right? You'll be doing 80 or even more. You'll push the limits probably even more. And the trouble is, remember, the laws are broken in the spiritual, emotional, sexual and physical areas. The trouble is, the human race is trying to stretch the limits of the law constantly in every area, morally, sexually, physically, spiritually. They're trying to stretch. How far can I go? How far can I stretch the limits? And if there weren't penalties associated with breaking a limit, all of our bodies would be complete messes. Full of disease and suffering. Our lives would be much more of a mess than they already are. The whole world would be at war constantly if there were no limits. But because there are the limits given upon by the pain and suffering, we can't bear it constantly. The longest wars in history have gone on for 5 or 6 years generally, but the reason why they don't go on much longer is because people can't bear it, right? The Vietnam War, of course, went on for longer, and look what happened at the end of that. People couldn't bear it, right? Because the longer something goes on, the more people can't bear it, right? And if it wasn't for the pain and suffering, you could bear it. You just do it and do it and do it, and there'd be no limit. And then as a result of there being no limits, you would actually damage yourself and damage you. If there weren't limits on this earth would have been damaged so much by humans that we wouldn't be here now if there weren't limits. Because in the past, there were certain events that occurred through the engagement or breaking of law that could have absolutely destroyed the earth if there wasn't a limit on the human ability to do so. So this is something worth bearing in mind. Make sense?
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, guys.
Yeah.
Philippa over there.
Philippa?